Oh, no problem. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Trey Chadlow. I'm here on this 23rd day of June 2025, here with my new friend Adam, whom I just met. Sorry about the delay. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we've got it worked out now. And I met Adam on Twitter just the other day or so, and we had a little snarky exchange. And I asked him if he'd be willing to come on, and he said, sure, he'd love to. So thank you, Adam, for indulging my request.
No worries.
Okay.
Would have been nice to have the camera up, but no.
What's that?
Would have been nice to have the camera up, but no.
Just that's fine. Oh, it's no problem. Yeah, we don't need a camera. It's no big deal. The thing that piqued me, I think, let me say, we had a Christians say the darndest things, which is a kind of a snarky account on Twitter, posted an Eric Hovind meme that talked about the world's smartest atheist and making fun of him. And it said the world's smartest man, he believes that Jesus Christ is God or something like this. This Asian guy's been going around on social media last few days, and I've seen him. I don't know, and so it's been kind of people going back and forth. And then so Adam says, when Christian zealots are desperate for validation. And so then I went to his page, and he says, I ish on flat earthers and religious zealots for breakfast. And so that's when I said, hey, okay, let's have a conversation then. But I'm not a flat earther. I'm not even up on that world, because it's too stupid for me to even waste my time with.
Fair enough.
But I am a Christian, and I love engaging on issues of ultimacy and just thinking about things and having my ideas challenged. Would you mind telling me just a little bit about yourself? Like if you're agnostic, or I like to get a little background from people. Like if you could tell me maybe a little, if you feel comfortable. If you don't, that's fine too. A little bit about your background, your religious background, or if you want to say what you do or anything like that, and I'll tell you about me. Would that be all right?
I don't really know what to say exactly, because I've never been religious in any way.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can really say, really.
Okay, but you're from the UK. I'm guessing you're probably not married.
No.
I just like to get background. Okay, well, let me tell you. So you didn't have any. You weren't raised in any kind of a religious background.
No.
Okay, all right, which is increasingly common, I think, in the UK. All right, so I live in Kansas City. I don't know if that is. I'm right in the middle of the United States, and I'm a Christian. I'm just turned 59. I've been a Christian now for 39 years. I became a Christian when I was 20, and I had kind of a religious background, at least with my mother. My father wasn't particularly religious. My mom was a Christian, and so I think she had some influence on me. And I had an experience, I would say a born again experience, where I had a significant change in my life when I was 20 years old. And then I married not too long after that. I've got 6 kids, ages 35 down to 22. Maybe he's 36 now. Let's see, no, 35. And sadly, I'm divorced. But I'm a dental lab technician. I'm here in my lab right now. I make crown and bridge work for dentists. And like I said, I like thinking about things, and I like challenging people, and I like being challenged. It's the only way you can really grow, by engaging with people with whom you disagree. And so I really like doing that. So thank you for joining me.
No worries.
So I'm trying to think where we should start here. That as an atheist, you do not bear a burden for the existence of God, because whoever makes the assertion must prove their perspective, right? Like if I'm saying that there is a God and you say there is not, you don't have any burden to prove, right?
Well, no, it's the absence of something is not really something you can prove. Right. You can only look into it, and if there's no evidence backing up, then we can only assume that it's not there.
Right. And so I mean, the way you express that, which is common for most people today, is, would it be fair to say that you would call yourself an empiricist rather than a rationalist? I tend to be, I'm more of a rationalist. I like to begin with reason and then go to the scientific method or go to empiricism, because empiricism can never give you certainty. All it can give you is, approximations or probabilities, because our senses trick us, and that's why science is always changing, which is not a bad thing. But whenever I'm trying to find out if something is true or not, I always want to go to the analytical arguments, or the arguments that are reasonable, that are, if I can find it, I want to get some mathematical certainty with a proposition before I try to even consider whether it is viable by way of empiricism. So
yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. And so, would you, all right, usually when I start out my inquiry with people, I always ask them basically for two presuppositions for instrumentation, so that we can use any method of inquiry. And the first thing I ask for is, do you agree that that the law of non-contradiction is valid? Or do you believe that reasonableness is the foundation for any kind of inquiry whatsoever? We can't violate the law of non-contradiction or the laws of thought. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then secondly, will you concede the basic reliability of sense perception? Not perfect, but just generally. It gives us some connection to this world.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. All right. So nobody's ever given me any trouble with those. So that's always got to, if you can't have reason foundation, and how do you know, how do you test propositions, and how do you have any coherent empirical data unless you can have basic reliability of sense perception? So, all right. So with those two things, I begin my inquiry and make the statement that if something exists, then something necessary must exist as well. So, and what we'll say is, if something exists, there are only four possibilities. And I like to say, for my argument, I don't need the reality of you. I don't need the reality of my office or this computer screen or anything. They could all be dreams. All I need is basically myself. Okay. And so if something exists, there are only four possibilities. Number one, it could be an illusion. Number two, it could be something that is self-created. And number three, it could be something that is self-existent. And number four, it is that which exists is something that is created by something that is self-existent. Now, those are the only four categories I've ever seen, and people have tried to offer me a fifth many times, and it's usually just an iteration of one of the other three, or one of the four. So, and I'm going to go through these one by one and demonstrate how only one of those is valid. So, that which exists is an illusion. Are you familiar with René Descartes? He was a 17th century philosopher. Have you ever heard of I think, therefore I am?
Yeah. Okay. I don't do much philosophy, so
that's fine.
Yeah.
No problem. Descartes basically was a guy, they were struggling, after the Reformation. There was a lot of upheaval in the world, because you had like certainty with the church. Like if you had a question about something that's very important, you could go to the church and they'd give you an answer. With the Reformation, that's kind of obliterated, where there's no longer the quote unquote head of the church and the dogmatic power authority over religious matters. And so there's a lot of uncertainty among the people. And so people would say, Descartes was saying, what can I know for sure? I want to know what kind of truth can be indubitable. He said, I can crawl into my Dutch oven and I can know something, because, empiricism, again, doesn't give you certainty. He goes, but what kind of truth cannot be doubted? And so what he said is, well, in order to doubt, I've got to be thinking, or there's got to be a doubter. And if I'm doubting, I'm thinking. And if I'm thinking, then at least if there's somebody who's doubting, who's thinking, they must at least be. And so he said, the one thing that I can know for sure, more than anything, is that I exist, because in order to doubt that, there has to be a doubter who's doubting it. So in other words, who's asking the question, and if it's there. So I know that everything that exists cannot be an illusion by way of cogito argument. And so, and I've had people say, "Oh, yeah, you could." And I said, "Well, who's asking?" and if there's a doubter, there's got to be a thinker, and to think you've got to exist. All right. So that which exists cannot be pure illusion. There must be some reality to it, because you, the inquirer, are asking the question. All right. And then secondly, it's that which exists is self-created. Can you imagine what problem that might represent if you say that something creates itself?
Because it's that clockwork sort of analogy, isn't it? Where it's like, who makes who created the clock, sort of thing, making the mechanism that forms it together.
Yeah, but it's even more basic than that. In other words, for something to create itself, it would need to predate itself. And so for self-creation and this is one of why I asked for the law of non-contradiction as one of our foundations. If you say that something can create itself, it has to at some time be and not be, or not be and then be at the same time in the same relationship. You can't get something from nothing,
Yeah.
Ex nihilo nihil fit is the Latin term that says out of nothing, nothing comes. All right. So, and of course we got all these games like, what's his name? Lawrence Krauss writing a universe from nothing. And all he does is, equivocate to nothing, meaning empty space, which is just stupid parlor tricks to sell books, in my opinion. But you can't have something predate itself in order to make itself before it exists. All right. So the first one is all that exists is illusion. You can't do that because there's got to be somebody asking the question. That which exists is self-created. Can't do that because it violates the law of non-contradiction. It's irrational. The third one is that which exists is self-existent. Now, something is self-existent means there's only two types of being in the universe. You got to have either self-existent and contingent or dependent existence. Adam, would you say that you are self-existent or dependent on things for your existence?
Dependence.
In other words, do you require air and water in order to live?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you required your parents to come into existence, right?
Yeah.
So you are contingent. You are dependent in your existence. Anything that changes is dependent because it's been brought to a new state of being by something outside of itself. It's an effect, and you can't have an effect without a cause. So that which exists, which we're making it real simple, saying me, the inquirer, whoever's asking the question, that which exists is self-existent. It's not a valid claim as well. So the only one that's left is that which exists is created by something that is itself self-existent, and that would be God. Now, if you want to say that, oh no, it's just like it turtles all the way down, you want to say, oh yeah, it's just everything is just changing, it's eternal universe, or you want to say like string theory or oscillation theory, or it's just collapsing, and that doesn't do anything. It only exacerbates the problem, because you can't have an eternal regress of effects that are not caused. And that's essentially what you'll say. If everything is changing, if the entire universe is made out of dependent existence, then it would be dependent independently, which would violate the law of identity. You're saying that which is dependent is also independent at the same time in the same relationship. That doesn't make any sense. So I've been arguing this for 15 years now. And not only have I never been refuted, I've never seen a rebuttal to the argument. So what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not one of those people where, I've been debating this topic. This is the first time that I've talked about this topic.
Okay.
But the problem with what you're saying is God existing, an intelligent being on its own.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that I have with that is it has the same problem as what you say with string theory and that sort of thing, because it's like, what is God dependent on?
Yeah, but you're saying God cannot exist unless he is contingent, which doesn't make any sense, because the very thing that needs to be for the equation is independent existence. If you just say, well, if everything, Bertrand, you know who Bertrand Russell is?
No.
Oh no. It's so funny because I was just telling somebody the other day, it's like the last 5 years, I used to be amazed that everybody knew everything I was talking about. And now I've gotten to the age now, I'm almost 60, where I almost always, when I talk to people about stuff, they don't know what I'm talking about, which is fine. Don't feel bad about it. But he was a very famous English mathematician in the early 19th or early 20th century. And he was an atheist. He was a very famous atheist. And I don't know if you heard of Bertrand Russell's teapot analogy or whatever. But he basically said, very intelligent man, but he misunderstood the principle of causality. He said basically, if everything needs a cause, then what caused God? But that's not what the principle says. The principle says every effect must have a cause. And so if you're going to say there's such a thing as an effect, you've also got to assert that there's such a thing as a cause. The principle of causality is what's called analytically true. It's true by definition. Are you familiar with the difference between synthetic and analytic statements? And you're probably not. Immanuel Kant was famous for kind of popularizing these distinctions. He was an Enlightenment philosopher. And he said that an analytic statement is something that is true by definition. And what you're doing basically in the subject and the predicate of a sentence, they're basically, you're saying the same thing only in a different way. For example, like you say, a bachelor is an unmarried man. You're not adding anything to bachelorness by saying it's an unmarried man. You're just redefining it. It's like a tautology. Like in mathematics, is generally tautological or analytically true. 2 + 2 = 4. So, but if you're going to say something like the bachelor wears a hat, you're adding hatness to the bachelor, to the subject of the sentence. So the predicate is adding something to the subject, and therefore that's called a synthetic statement. So, and the thing about that with synthetic statements, like that's basically what the scientific method is like. It's induction, where you experience things and then you make logical conclusions about that, but you can never get certainty from them because, again, it requires empirical analysis, and sometimes our senses can sometimes deceive us, and we don't really see things as they are. So when we say that every effect must have a cause, that's an analytically true statement. It's not a statement that's about science. It's a statement about logic, because the only way that you can define a cause is to invoke the concept of effect. The only way you can define an effect is to invoke the element of cause. So if you want to talk about an effect without a cause, it's nonsense. It doesn't make sense, because you can't understand what an effect is unless you invoke the reality of cause. And so if you want to say the whole universe is all a bunch of effects, a bunch of things that change, that's an incoherent assertion. It doesn't make any sense. So it won't get you anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with the universe in general. It's like how has a whole bunch of nothing formed into these planets, and it's something I understand, but that's the thing with science. As we go along, we get more in depth into what our reality is.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the stage now where it's going into quantum physics, and
sure,
like the sort of stuff that's happening there is just dizzying to me.
We don't understand it, but it's not illogical. That's the problem. Quantum physics doesn't complicate my matter whatsoever. I mean, certainly there are a lot of things that we don't understand. We don't understand superposition, but okay, so we just got to dig in. Some people want to say that because of superposition, the law of non-contradiction falls apart at the quantum level, which is just, it's stupid. And it's also lazy science, because once you say that the law of non-contradiction no longer holds, you've just committed the fallacy called the fallacy of the it's the principle of explosion. It basically says that once you deny the law of non-contradiction, then the opposite of everything that you assert is also true at the same time. There's no inquiry whatsoever. If you don't have the law of non-contradiction, you can't do that. Are there things that are mysterious? Are there things we don't understand? Sure. But so there are many, many, many things that we don't understand. But that doesn't mean that it's irrational. So when we're doing science, we've always got to come to the table bringing the idea as a foundation. That's why I started with this, that there is rational coherence. And so if somebody's going to ask me, can you prove that, blue garage doors Thursday enchiladas? That's like, what do you mean? It doesn't make any sense. You've got to make a coherent statement for you. Or you want to say the universe, just that statement where they say turtles all the way down, or they say, oh, the universe is just eternally changing. And then we can do science on top of that. It's like, no, it doesn't make any sense. You've got to have a fundamental, rationally coherent proposition in order to do the scientific method, in order to test it. And if you don't do that, you're not doing science. And so at the very fundamental thing, remember I said ex nihilo nihil fit, out of nothing, nothing comes. If there's something coming out of nothing, I remember there's a fairly well-known atheist who's kind of a philosopher too. I used to, a long time ago, there's this thing called Google Hangouts. And we had this community called the Great Debate Community. And it's probably been 10 years ago when Google dropped that thing. But we used to have this community. And there was one guy in there who was supposed to be really smart. And he said, yeah, well, of course you can have something from nothing. Because if something comes from nothing, there's nothing keeping it from coming. It's so stupid. But anyway, he was supposed to be really smart. But no, if you have pure nothing, which is pure nothing, we can't even comprehend. We can't even imagine it, because the idea of nothing is an idea in our mind. So we can't even comprehend full nothingness. And if there were absolutely nothing, then we would have absolutely nothing today. But since there is something today, then there's something that has the attribute called necessary being. It's being that cannot not be. It's being that is not dependent on something else, and that upon which we depend. It's the only thing that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, because it goes on to how life is created in the first place, because it's very specific conditions that end up bringing life onto planets, and then that life builds up and evolves over time and become what we are now. So it's like a case of, how are we here? I get what you're saying, because it makes more sense to think that something created us rather than being created out of nothing. But it's as you get more into quantum physics, we could understand exactly what makes up the universe, because there's like this thing where it's like a web of, I don't know what it is, but it's like going from a molecule to an atom to, going small in size. And it's just figuring out what's beyond there, what makes up the universe exactly. But
well, you agree that it's not nothing, right?
No.
Okay. So there's something eternal about the universe.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're not eternal, right?
No.
Okay. So everything that changes is not eternal. So there's got to be something that's unchanging. And it can't be physical either, because physicality is limited by space. It's contingent upon space. So whatever that ultimate reality is, it cannot be spatial. It cannot be physical. It cannot be changing by definition. And logic leads us to that. So it must be a spiritual being. And it must also be personal, because there's this principle called the principle of proportionate causality, which says that something can only cause in something else what it itself has the capacity for. And I always use the example, I cannot give my kids the capacity to fly like a bird, because I just don't have that. So people want to say, I've had people concede my argument, say, okay, yeah, well, maybe there's a self-existent being that gives rise to everything else, but it's not personal, it's not volitional like we are. And I'm like, well, how does it give us the properties that we ourselves have when it is lacking that? It doesn't make any sense. It can't pass on something that it itself does not have. So that's another thing, that it's got to be a personal being, and it's teleological, it's purposeful. It's like Like it has intention. We are intending to have this conversation. And I would say if there's anything intentional today, just one instance of intentionality, there's something eternal that has that same property of intentionality. Otherwise, there would be no intention today.
Yeah, I mean,
I've yet to have a rebuttal. So what do you think?
No, it's just a lot to take in, so I'm just trying to process my thoughts here.
And it might be something it's just something for you to think about, and you may be able to think about it and come up with something that refutes it. But like I said, I've talked to some really smart people, philosophy majors, and high-end.
Yeah, I mean that's
PhD
the thing, because this is not the sort of thing that I do, and you've got all that experience with you.
Sure.
So,
and in all fairness too, as well, our society today is characterized by empirical data. During the Enlightenment, and I always blame Immanuel Kant for this. Basically, the whole concept of metaphysics or science or thinking about things, ultimate realities, he basically put it on a shelf, said you can't think about those things. He came up with a new way of thinking about things called epistemology. It's like how we know things. He came up with this way of knowing, and he basically said, well, if anything's going to give you any knowledge at all, you got to be able to experience it with the senses. And so basically he took this science, which is throughout the whole history of mankind is a very important science called metaphysics. It's like that which underlies the physics, and put it on a shelf. He didn't deny it. In fact, he claimed to be Christian himself, but he just said we can't prove it. So you see this thing where you say, oh, just take it by faith, which most Christians have today, which I can't stand. And this is what atheists make fun of Christians for. They say, oh yeah, you have faith. Well, faith means that you believe in things you know are not true, or things that you have no way of knowing. That's the two tropes that the atheists put upon Christians, but it's not true. That's not what faith is at all. It's not what we believe. Unfortunately, though, most Christians do think that, and I think it's the influence of the Enlightenment. But we're having a turnaround now, where we're having, I would say, a new renaissance, where we are returning back to an older way of thinking and being able to recategorize or revive the categories of metaphysics. And that's why, to me, atheism's been dead for about 10 years. And I cannot. That's why I was so snarky on there. There were probably 5 people in that thread where we were on, and I challenged them all, and not one of them said a word except for you. It's nearly impossible for me to find somebody to have a conversation with anymore, and I think it's because most atheists, they still hold to their atheism, but they're not nearly as bold about it. Do you know who Peter Boghossian is?
No, you can ask me like, do you know this? Do you know that? Chances are no.
Oh well, ask him anyway. I'm going to ask anyway. He's because he's an American. You probably don't know him, but he's a very famous atheist. And actually, he's not as strong an atheist as he was, I don't think, anymore. But he's pretty prominent around here. But he wrote a book called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And what he does is he uses the Socratic method by asking questions to challenge people in their faith, and basically says, oh, on a scale of 1 to 100, they call themselves street epistemologists. I don't even heard them as all. Those are his disciples. They call themselves street epistemologists, and they basically will go up to people and say, they're very nice and very gracious. And Socrates taught by asking questions. And so they'll go up and they'll talk to people and they'll ask questions of people. And they'll say, on a scale of 1 to 100, how sure are you about your Christian faith? And I'll say, oh, like a 98 or something like that. And they go, okay, great. Now, can you tell me why it is that you believe? Can you tell me the reason for it? And his whole passion is, there's a nobility to what he's trying to do, because he's trying to get people to test their ideas. And he finds that the vast majority of Christians who believe their religion don't have a reason for it. It's just what they were taught, and that's all they believe. And so he uses this, and by the end of the conversation, they usually have them, oftentimes have them questioning their faith because they have no reason for it. And so he's just trying to get people to think well. What's ironic about it is I always try to challenge to have conversations. He'll never talk to me. I talked to this chief disciple one time, though. We had a good conversation and gave him the same thing. He didn't say a word to me. He said, oh, okay, thank you. Interesting. Didn't challenge me a bit. But But
Yeah, I like
anyway,
that.
he's the one that defines faith. I was thinking about it because I got the book, and in the beginning chapters of the book, he says faith is pretending to know something that you know is not true, or pretending to know things that you have no way of knowing. And that's not what Christians believe. I mean, we're not trying to believe things that we know are true, and we're not trying to inquire in things that cannot be known. That doesn't mean it's not an element of faith. All of us exercise faith. Everybody has it. You, as an atheist, in any kind of empiricism, you've got to have faith that the law of non-contradiction is going to be valid when you make your inquiry, or that the laws of physics are going to be consistent, at least to some degree, so that you can do your thing. So you trust in it. So the question is not whether you have faith, but is your faith a good faith? Because none of us, no human being has certainty in an absolute sense, because you can't. So the question is, do you have a reasonable faith, or do you have an unreasonable faith? And I would say historically, Christians in the 20th century, and like I said, it started messing up in the Enlightenment, have been very shallow. But thankfully, that's changing now. And and even atheists now, atheists know nothing generally about philosophy. And it's because it's just their whole question is how something happens. They never have really been faced with the question of why. And for me, I'm a why guy. If you don't tell me the why of something, what's the use of it? And so for me, I never did well in school. And I'm the kind of guy, it's like, you got to give me the reason why I'm doing something that's important. And I never saw the meaning of life. I never thought there was a compelling interest why I should apply myself so hard in school, because I'm not motivated by money. I'm not motivated by power, or particularly by prestige either. And I'm like, I just want to get out of here. And then when I was 20, I understood the gospel, and I understood that the universe is created for a specific purpose. And it's all teleological, and there is a purpose in why I'm here, and everything kind of opened up to Technicolor to me. And then I got a why for it, and then I love learning now, and I it's fascinating to me, just any number of things. I just like to learn about everything, It's fascinating to me. But the empiricist and the atheist can never give you a why. It's called Hume's guillotine. It's like Hume says you can't get an ought from an is. And do you know who Sam Harris is?
No.
Oh, yeah, he's a famous atheist here in the States, and he wrote a book called The Moral Landscape, and I think he was considered to be the catalyst of the new atheist movement. Are you familiar with the new atheist movement?
No.
Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett. Do you know who they are? Don't tell me you don't know who Richard Dawkins is.
No.
You don't know who Richard Dawkins is?
No.
Oh my gosh, he's an Englishman. He's like the greatest evolutionary biologist alive today. I can't believe he's like the number one leader of the atheist movement. And Christopher Hitchens, do you remember him? You ever know him?
No.
Those three guys are all Englishmen. And they called them the four horses of the apocalypse, and they were supposed to be these, ominous atheists that were bringing truth to the world. And anyway, Sam Harris, this guy, he's a neuroscientist in the United States, wrote this book called The Moral Landscape. And he basically said, oh, no, you can get an ought from an is. Science can give us a moral framework. And he basically said, well, if you start out with the idea that your goal is to minimize suffering and advance basically life as best you can, or flourishing as best you can, then you can look at science and see that which hinders flourishing and causes pain and suffering, and then that gives your moral law. And I just thought, I can't imagine. Not only can I believe people bought that book, I can't believe anybody published it. It's so stupid. He's sitting there trying to tell you, I'm going to give you the ought, but he says, assume it at the beginning. In other words, that life is special. And he's supposed to be telling us the reason why life is special. That's what underlines all moral law. Okay. And he says, I'm going to tell you how science tells us that life is special. And then he says, but we're going to start out saying that, no, we're just going to assume it. The very thing I'm supposed to prove, we're just going to assume it. And then science can tell us that. And I'm like, this man is, again, he's a very smart guy, but it was such an idiotic thing. It's called the petitio principii fallacy. It's a fallacy of where you're assuming the thing that you're supposed to be proving, which you probably encounter a lot with Christianity. They'll say, oh, well, in fact, I might've seen maybe it was on your timeline, but somebody was saying, they were talking about that Asian guy that's supposed to be so smart, and I don't know anything about him. But the argument that they were attributing to him was really stupid. He said basically something like, because the Bible, Christians will say, well, the Bible is the Word of God, and since the Bible is the Word of God, everything that it says is true. That's a petitio principia argument. You cannot have your conclusion in any of your premises of your argument, and that's what Christians like to do this a lot. And but atheists will also do the same thing.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Because this is why in my bio I say Christian zealots, well, religious zealots, because it's those kind of people that I'm against.
Sure.
I mean,
there are plenty of those.
Yeah.
Especially online.
Yeah, so I wasn't expecting such an in-depth conversation like this, where I'm just like bombarded with, all kinds of philosophical. I can't even speak.
Philosophical, yeah.
Yeah, philosophical ideas. But it has been an aspect that I wanted to look into, because I've been getting into reading books around science and, that psychology and that sort of thing. But so I always had in mind to look into philosophy. And
that's actually changing in the atheist community. There really is a renaissance as well, or a revival, if you will, of looking into metaphysics and studying philosophy. And I'm a Protestant. I'm a Reformed Baptist. I'm a Protestant Christian. But when it comes to philosophy, some of the best people to look to is sometimes Roman Catholics. They'll have some, because the Protestants kind of gave up the ghost, if you will. They kind of gave up in the Enlightenment under Immanuel Kant. The Roman Catholics did not, though. And I'm not actually promoting Roman Catholicism, because I don't think they have a true gospel, but they do have a really good doctrine of God. They're really good for philosophical ideas. Thomas Aquinas was in some ways he was really bad, but some ways he was really good as well. And so in fact, let's see, what's his name? Banjo Atheist. You ever heard of him? You probably haven't, but anyway, he's a guy that I was trying to get him to have a conversation just like 2 days ago, and he blocked me. But he just said that he's getting ready to take some Catholic philosophical classes, which I thought was funny, but he refused to talk to me. But anyway, you've seen that a lot now, where they're understanding that atheism has no matrix for talking about the good. All it can tell you is what is. And so that's why I say atheism, there are more people adhering to atheism now more than ever. But I don't know if you're familiar with this, but whenever there's a big movement, in cultural, in cultural environments, when it gets to be the biggest and most popular, it's probably already dead, because, people kind of come onto things. The general public kind of comes onto things after it's already peaked. And I say that there are tons of atheists now, but it's on a decline big time now, because they can't answer any of these questions about the good. This new atheist movement was really hot from about 2005 to 2015 or 16 or somewhere around there. It was like super, super popular. And Richard Dawkins, I can't believe you know him, but he's like, you should look him up. He was such a rock star. And now people for the most part don't like him, because most of these atheists that promise to have all the answers, they turned out to be kind of nasty people, and their lives are not anything. Well, I don't know what he has, but when they came out and they were saying religion's stupid and it's for dumb people and all it does is cause people to be oppressed and not free and blah, 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 blah. And people are like, yeah. And then people kind of come to their camp and they say, okay, well, what do you got to offer me? And they got, and then they go, you're a real jerk. And they just think, oh, they're disgusting people. They used to have in the early 2000s to the mid 2000s, I mean, till like 2010 or 2012, they had these rock star conferences every year where the famous atheists would come and speak. And I think it was around 2014 or 15, they started getting all these allegations where men were sexually abusing the women coming to the conferences, and that's what killed it. I think that's what killed. And nobody, you never find these atheist things anymore. Nobody cares about it anymore because it's gone. The glory's gone. They promised all kinds of great things, but they delivered exactly nothing. And like Richard Dawkins, he's really smart, but on evolutionary biology, but everything else he's terrible. And he tries to pretend to be an expert on everything, and he's just terrible.
Yeah. When you say the good, what are you talking about specifically?
I'm sorry, when I say what?
You mentioned the good just vaguely. I just want to know what you're talking
about. God. What am I exactly asserting?
The benefits of atheism, is it that?
The good. Did you say the good?
Yeah.
Is that what you? Oh, okay. Yeah, virtue, like
morality.
Yeah. What would, to you, in your mind, when you think of virtue, what do you think of? Give me an example of a virtuous act. Anything.
Well,
let me help you out. If you see an old lady who needs help across the street, what's the right thing to do?
Help her across.
What's the wrong thing to do?
Well,
either nothing or push her in front of a car to be really evil. But we all know that. We all know that caring for others is the highest virtue, if you will. And some would say love. I like to have conversations with people on the street, and I'll go up to our college town close to our area here. We've got a Kansas University. I'll go up to their downtown there and have a sign, and I have 2 chairs, and I just have conversations with people. And the sign says, "Why are we here?" And I like to just get people, because everybody kind of asks that questions, but it's usually in the back of their minds, or it's something they don't really talk about a lot. And so I'm trying to bring that question to the fore, because that's the most important, to me, one of the most important questions. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? And we all know instinctively that we should, and this is my own, when somebody will come up to me, they'll say, "Well, what do you think?" And I'll say, "No, you got to tell me what you think first." And so I'll make them give me an answer or two. And then I'll tell them my answer to why we are here is, we are here, and I coined this phrase myself, we are here to sanctify existence. In other words, we are to treat existence as if it's special. And another way to put that would be, we are here to love. The most important thing that we all experience in this world is relationality. It's love. It's the greatest of all things. And so what I mean by sanctity of existence, I'm not just saying, oh, you should be nice to your neighbor or something like that, but I'm saying you should be even care for the earth. We all know that we should be stewards of the earth. We shouldn't be, ravaging things. If you're going to cut down a tree, we know, saying, hey, you need to plant another tree. You need to take care of things. You need to conserve. We don't want to pollute a lot because it's bad. And it's like, but for the atheist, they believe in these things passionately, but they don't have a reason for it. I always ask atheists, I'll say, well, does existence objectively matter? And they will say, well, it matters to me. And I say, yeah, but I'm not talking about your personal preference. I'm saying, is it a fact that existence is special, that existence matters? And they always say no, because they have to. If everything's fortuitous, there is no value to anything inherently. And so I said, oh, so you treat everything as if it's special because you don't have the fortitude to look at reality as it is. And my passionate thing I always say, and atheists say, thank you, we need to live a life that corresponds to reality. All right. And so when I challenge him, I say, you say that life doesn't matter, but you don't live according to what you say existence is, because you say basically existence is meaningless. We impose meaning to it, but all they're saying there when you're saying that is that I know it doesn't really matter, but I'm just lying to myself because I don't have the fortitude to face reality as it is. And that's not living in a way that corresponds to reality. They can't get away from the fact that they know that their life seems this special. If they have a friend who's contemplating suicide, they intuitively say, no, let me help you. I'll help you get through this difficult time. And you try to stop them from doing that because you know instinctively that their life is inherently special, and it should be preserved and cared for. If somebody's doing self-harm or something, you want to help them to get into a state of mind where they're not doing that. They're not wanting to be so despairing. They're wanting to be happy with their life and move on. We all know that. But the atheist has absolutely no matrix for saying that it actually does matter. They just say it doesn't matter and lie to yourself that it does, just so that you can have a bearable life. And it's like, that's why I say atheism's dead, because they just can't answer these big questions of the why of anything. And so from my perspective, we are here to sanctify existence. But it's an important thing that I tie it in with the other things that we talked about. If existence is special, if we know intuitively that existence is special, and our existence has been given to us by someone else, and someone might say, yeah, my parents. I say, yeah, your parents. And then where did your parents get their existence? Oh, from their parents. I say, yeah, keep going as far as you want. Sometime you got to come to that self-existent being that had to give you your existence. And so if it is true that existence matters and your existence has been given to you by another, it logically follows that your number one attribute as a human should be to give thanks and give praise to him who gives you your existence. And he himself doesn't have existence. God doesn't have existence. We have it. We're like a composite being. Aristotle would say, I have the substantial form of humanity. And then at some point I had existence given to me. So I'm like we're composites of many things. We have many parts to us. But I would say even metaphysically, we have different parts to us. We have our essence. I'm a human, and I had my existence given to me at some time. So these things had to be put together like a model or something. Something had to put me together. God's not like that. If he's put together, then we have to call God whatever that was that brought his parts together. But God doesn't have parts. God is a simple, unified, single being, and he doesn't have existence like us. He is pure subsistence existence itself. He is existence. And so if existence is the highest thing that we can see, then it logically follows, and then we say it's the good, that we would love him with everything that was within us. And the Bible says that the two commandments, Jesus said, of all the law and the prophets are based on is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And everybody likes to hold to the golden rule, even if they don't acknowledge God. But what you're saying with moral law always is that existence is special. Every single law that you see everywhere, it doesn't always meet the goal, but the goal is to sanctify existence. When you see street lights, it's to sanctify existence. When you see anti-violence laws, that's to sanctify existence. Everything circles around that. And Plato was quoting Socrates, I think he said, the goal of everything is to save the phenomena of existence. Everything is about salvation. Even the atheists, they live every moment of their life saving the phenomena of existence. They want to preserve this world as long as they can. They preserve their own lives. Some people say, no, I don't care. I don't care about life. And I said, that's not true, because if you didn't really care about life, you wouldn't eat and you would die. But you're here now and you feed yourself. And when you're ill, you take care of yourself and you worry about yourself. Therefore, you do care about existence, even though you say that you don't. Nobody who's alive does not care about existence, truly. They say they do, but they really do care about it.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is the fact that we have our senses and every part of our body is telling us to preserve our life.
Right.
So by that standard, we already have value because we don't want to suffer through any
That's
sort
right.
of pain or discomfort.
Right. Would it be fair to say that we are determined to value existence as humans? And actually, all living creatures are programmed towards survival.
Yeah.
So you cannot have determination instantiating unintentionally. Something had to intend the intention of life in us. It doesn't happen by, the Darwinian evolution. I just did a debate. If you look at my page, I just posted this. I had with one of my opponents. On Saturday, I was talking with him, and he was basically saying, I forgot the point I was going to make. Something about existence mattering. I'll do that sometimes. I'll forget completely what I'm talking about. But we all know that existence is special, and we can't get away from that. And it cannot happen unintentionally. You can't have intentionality beginning Oh, that's what it is. He's a Darwinist, so he basically says, an evolutionist. He says basically, intentionality came about as an emergent property, which is just a magic talk. Just say it just happened. And so, but my argument against that is to say, imagine this circle that I make all around it is all the universe, everything that exists ever, sometime in the past. All right. And there's no intention in it whatsoever. All right. There's no purpose. There's no goals. Like we're having a goal right now to have this conversation. Yeah. There's no goals. And then sometime in the future, they want to say it comes about. That's not possible, because then when you have is, you're saying the complete state of everything is unintentional, right? And then they say intentionality comes about. But intentionality is intentional by definition. So you can't say that unintentionality intends intention into existence. If there's ever a point in a time where there was pure unintentionality, we would have pure unintentionality today. It's kind of like something from nothing argument again. There must be something intentional that is eternally intentional if we're to have any intentionality today, because unintentionality is unintentional. And if the entire universe is unintentional, it cannot be intentional. They're violating the law of identity again. You're saying unintentionality somehow is intentional in order to bring about intention. And it's nonsense. That's why I like rationalism better, because you start with the reasons and then you can do better science. And that's how you can protect yourself from making really crazy accusations, which I think we live in an age right now where there's just all kinds of crazy things people say. And my mentor, his name's R.C. Sproul. He's a theologian. He's dead. He died 2 years ago. He used to say, we're living in the age of the greatest age of irrationality in the history of mankind, which I don't think it's an exaggeration. He said, we're not anti-technology, and we're not anti-educational. We're very much into technology and education, but we are not rational people. We are very irrational people as a society, even in the West right now. Yes, we're technologically advanced, but asking the big questions and the hard questions about things, people have no idea how to answer those questions. And that's one of the reasons why I think that we're at a low point right now. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in the UK and in the United States, there's a bit of a revival coming on with religion. And it's particularly, are you Gen Z?
No.
You know, okay. I'm probably a little younger than you. With Gen Z, there's a revival going on, and it's happening the same thing too. I got my youngest son is a Gen Z, where they're becoming more religious because they're seeing the emptiness of this world, and there's no answers really people are having, and and they're to religion, and not like waves or anything, but it's growing significantly. A lot of the interest in the Christian church is just in the last few years has really been going, and I think it's going to continue to go up because people are at a nadir. They're at a low point of reality, and they're miserable. They're, you go to the doctor and he says, "Here, take these drugs." And so take the drugs, and you're still miserable, and you're like, "What? Why am I not happy?" It's because we've just lost this. And I think atheism introduced this nihilism, this meaningless. There's no answers to anything. It makes people miserable.
Yeah, I completely get that because I'm 32 years old, and I would call myself sort of like a nihilist, where nothing really matters at the end of the day. Yeah. So yeah, I do get where you're coming from there. I'm not against like religion because I know the benefits that it can give. But it's just that I prefer to look at, well, it's like, as you said, like looking into evidence towards one thing or another to conclude, if but it's like it's as you're saying, unintentionality leads to intentionality. It's just really an evolution of survivability. Because it's extremely basic life forms that build up and become progressively more complex. And it's just, I don't really know how to explain this because I'm not that kind of guy who, has all the knowledge around these topics that we're talking about. But it's a progressive stage of building up these traits until we become what we're like now, where we can think for ourselves and have these like abstract thoughts, and give meaning to our own lives. It's definitely something that seems like it had to have come from somewhere, but there's no reason for there to be no reason for it other than survivability. Because as we gain more complex thoughts, become smarter, we're more likely to survive as a result.
Okay, but you're smuggling in, again, you're doing a petitio principii fallacy. You're assuming the consequence of your argument as a part of your argument. You're saying that because we want to survive, therefore survival evolved. But you're starting with intentionality and saying because there's intentionality, then intentionality came to be. You can't do that. See, you're using as a justification. This is why Darwin's idea, I always mock Darwinian evolution. I believe in evolution at a certain level, and adaptive, natural selection is certainly an empirical fact. But the whole idea that there's no formal principle with Darwinian synthesis. There's no intentionality. All it is those things that survive, they live. But even in the subtitle of Darwin's, magnum opus, or his greatest work, is it says on the origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. So he says the preservation of favored races. In other words, the goal is certain races are good races, that they last and then they struggle. What are they struggling for? They're struggling to live. Well, wait a minute. There's no goal. Yet he has intentional teleological goal all over that the what do you call it? The title of the book. It's so stupid. He says, yeah, there's no goal, but the goal is life. Well, wait a minute. What? No, there is no goal. Don't talk about life as if somehow it's good. There is no goal. And, you look at a Darwinian, proponent, and whenever they discover a new species, they get all excited. Oh, look at this. What do you mean? It doesn't matter. But they can't get away from it. We all know that existence is special. And we want to sit there and say, no, it doesn't work. I mean, and so when you say that, survival, because we wanted to survive, then we had to have intention. No, the survival is the intention. You need to show me how unintentionality, whatever it is that's unintentional, can somehow be intentional in order to bring intention into being. But you're assuming the very thing that you're negating at the same time in the same relationship. It's nonsense. It makes no sense. There's no way you can do it. It doesn't pass this test of logic. I always say this, Darwinian synthesis was a great 19th century idea, but we're living in the 21st century. It's time to move on and to grow up and to start asking deeper questions. It is so, to me, it's just the only reason Darwin really took off, in my opinion, is because of the doctrine of spontaneous generation, which is, that life can come from non-life. And, they used to look at puddles and see, frogs and fish come out of there, and they couldn't see the birds dropping eggs and different things in the puddle there. And they thought, oh, it just happens, just boom. And they thought life is so simple and just come about. If it weren't for that, I believe spontaneous generation, which is abiogenesis, is the modern form of that. I don't think Darwin ever would have taken off because it's just so stupid. You can't have purpose coming about unintentionally. It doesn't make any sense. Darwinism has no explanatory power, really, at that level. It's not comprehensive enough. It can't give you the why. And if you can't have the why, then who cares about the how? But listen, Adam, I'm going to have to let you go. I like to keep these about an hour long.
Yeah.
We've been on about an hour. But you've been very kind and not argumentative. Sometimes when I argue with people or when I have exchanges with people, they'll talk over me. I always call it the filibuster of words.
Yeah. I mean,
you haven't been trying to fight. You've been like, I can tell you're thinking about what I'm saying, and you may not agree, but at least you're thoughtful and you're willing to entertain, what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that I'll listen to again and again to take it all in properly. Because right here, right now,
Sure.
this is beyond my level,
Sure.
and I admit to that. And
Mhm.
that sort of attitude that I bring upon X, it's just I'm just it's just really an attack on people like the posts that you saw.
Yeah. And I actually I like that. You notice I'm sassy too. When online, I kind of
Yeah,
like the banter. It's fun for me as
yeah.
well. But it
I mean,
always
yeah,
happens when we talk in person. I'm always much more gracious. But that's part of the fun of it, of
yeah,
the social media banter. So that's great. No problem. All right. Well, if you want to talk again, we can talk again or anything like that. But it's
yeah,
been very
sure thing,
nice.
yeah.
And, yeah, it's very nice to meet you. One of the things I love about the internet having this, I've met several friends. In fact, I have a couple of friends. I have and he's still an atheist today. Two friends that are one's in Scotland, the other one's on the Scilly Isles off of the northern coast there. And I've met many people all over the world, and I really love that. It's been really fun,
Yeah,
being exposed to people other than my own little circle here. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
yeah, no worries. I'm probably like the most useless person out of everyone that you've spoken to, but
Oh no, you've been a
uh,
delight. I mean, like I said, what's funny is, all right. So when we had this great debate community, we're in Google Plus, this other platform where there's a lot of debate going on, a lot of stuff, and I did a lot of these they call them hangouts, and it's so funny because nobody would concede a point. Like no
yeah,
atheist would concede a point. And so I went up and I started doing this street conversations. I go up there and have conversations with people on the street, and every person, I can only remember one person that I've ever talked to that when we got done with the conversation, they said, "Wow, that's amazing. That's really cool." When that first happened to me, I thought, "Am I in a dream state?" Because regular people on the streets don't have an axe to grind. They're just regular people. But atheists, they don't want to admit, so many of them, they don't want to admit
yeah,
that they're wrong. And it was like, I thought, man, I'm in heaven here. I can't believe how nice people are and how they appreciate what it was so funny for me it was
yeah,
such a shock for me. But and like I said, now I can't even find atheists who are even willing to have a conversation. So I'm glad that I could talk with you and I appreciate it.
yeah.
So okay, with that, I'll let you go, and
All right.
we can keep in touch. I'm going to follow you
Yeah,
on Twitter,
definitely.
and
Yeah,
maybe we can keep in touch and talk again sometime.
yeah. Okay.
All
Cheers
right,
for
Adam.
this.
Nice to meet you. All right,
All
cheers
right.
to you. We'll see you.
See ya.